From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now with Steve Sisolak and Patrick Walker.
Well, the legislature in Carson City is coming up on its next key deadline for bills to make it out of their first house. This is just after coming out of a deadline. Thanks for joining us. I'm Patrick Walker.
And I'm Steve Sisolak. It's led to a series of votes on bills ahead of that Tuesday deadline. So let's start today's show with a look of some of the key bills that moved. SB 201 will create a statewide database for payday loans and other high-interest loans. SB 262, which creates a drug pricing transparency law for asthma drugs, passed out of the Senate, and an assembly bill that bans for-profit prisons, AB 183, moved on as well. Now, Nevada doesn't have any for-profit prisons right now, but it would ban them in the future, and it would also stop the state from contracting with them in the future.
And one that will probably come right up to the deadline that we are watching is SB 224. That would create more secrecy surrounding the state PERS retirement program. So, Steve, a lot of the bills that will be most contentious, those were marked as exempt, so they're not going to be subject to this deadline or probably the other ones coming up.
Yeah, the bills that include things like prevailing wages on school construction projects, raising the minimum wage to $12 an hour, funding for opportunity scholarships, bills like that, budget bills are not subject to the deadline, so they will go all the way to the very end. And other bills that gain an exemption through the leaders can also go and not pass the deadline, but still be alive before the legislature ends.
And the reason for that, the budget isn't finally stitched together and signed until really the last couple of days of the session.
Right, exactly. The economic forum doesn't even start till May 1st, so we won't even see those closing budgets until mid to late May.
Well, a controversial trio of recalls sparked a legal fight that went all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court. But before that decision comes down, the Nevada legislature is looking at reforming the state's recall laws.
Now, a bill that would make it harder to recall Nevada elected officials. First, once signatures are submitted, instead of examining just a representative sample for valid signatures, county clerks would have to examine every single signature. When that was done with the recall petitions last year, they failed to meet the threshold. Second, recall proponents would have to put up the money to do all that counting unless they submitted an affidavit saying that putting up the cost would just be too large of a financial burden. Third, proponents would have to submit all the signatures they've gathered after the first 45 days of the 90-day signature gathering period. That would give the target of a recall a list of names he or she could ask to sign a request to strike their signature from the petition. And fourth, those strike requests could be submitted at any time until the petition is reviewed by the county clerks, even in the period after the final signatures have been turned in. One of the people targeted by last year's recalls testified in favor of SB 450.
Think about that. Someone who simply didn't like me wasted taxpayers' money to harass my neighbors for months to collect signatures on an effort to recall someone who was retiring to become a licensed foster parent and not returning to the legislature. It was a complete abuse of our laws and the rights of Nevadans to recall a public official. It was pointless retaliation, and in my opinion, an intent to bullying me, and from political rivals. This was not what our recall system was designed for.
Now, the bill also makes it a felony to misrepresent the intent of a petition, punishable by 1 to 4 years in prison, and also makes it a felony to put a false signature on a petition. The bill passed out of committee 4-1. Next stop is the Senate floor, where it faces that deadline we told you about to pass by April 23rd.
A proposed development near Red Rock Conservation Area west of town has been a point of contention for nearly a decade. A 2,000-acre mixed-use, mostly housing development has been in the planning stages for the Red Rock Conservation Area, just outside of it, as a matter of fact, right here. That's where it would go. Now, nearby residents have long been in opposition, citing concerns related to safety, the environment, and encroachment on Red Rock, which is right here just across Highway 159. They made their voices heard once again this week as county commissioners voted to delay development.
Why are we here again wasting your time?
The fight over a proposed 3,000 home development on the southwest side of the valley reaching a head during a key hearing.
We're not trying to tell them that they can't develop. They can develop. But they bought this piece of garbage without a road access directly to what they needed to do. That's not our problem.
The developers of a proposed subdivision on top of Blue Diamond Hill asking county commissioners for a waiver, allowing them to move forward in the permit process. Gypsum Resources LLC wants the ability to use a road off of Highway 159 for construction and emergency access to the subdivision, and for the county to approve plans before they secure the right-of-way for the primary access road through BLM land.
The applicant is not proposing to waive either of those two conditions.
County Commissioner Justin Jones represented the organization Save Red Rock prior to his election last fall. He made the motion to deny the developer's request for waivers after declaring that the state ethics board gave him the okay to vote on the matter.
The voters in District F did not elect me to shy from my voting on issues that matter to them, and especially not this issue. Planning
consultant Ron Crater says the developer is not surprised by the decision.
We're going to continue forward with the project. As planned, as proposed. We don't see this as a setback at all.
Opponents see the commission's decision as a victory.
We're glad that the commissioners decided, hey, Red Rock is worth it. We're not just going to drop it for any little condition.
All right, so to access the development, you would have to come in somewhere off of Highway 160, which is there in orange. That's also known as Blue Diamond Road. The developer will not be able to build a public road into the subdivision off of Highway 159 here in yellow, coming from the west. That's terms of a prior settlement. That's as per those terms. Steve.
Thanks, Patrick. New Jersey Senator and presidential candidate Cory Booker kicked off a three-day Nevada swing in Las Vegas Thursday night by targeting younger voters. He stopped by a meet and greet at UNLV with the university's Young Democrats. Booker spoke briefly with the media, fielding a lot of questions about the Mueller report. He said everyday voters don't seem to care much about that, so one reporter asked what voters have been asking him about on the campaign trail.
I think voters are talking most about issues that concern them and their families. Access to health care, jobs that pay a living wage, access to affordable housing, public education and the quality of public education. These are the concerns I'm hearing most about.
Booker was up north on Friday before spending the day today at a half dozen smaller meet and greets with voters.
Two other people talking about running for president were in Las Vegas this week. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California spoke Tuesday night at a meeting of Young Democrats at UNLV. He officially announced his run a week ago, and former CEO of Starbucks and, if you follow sports, Sonic's sale villain Howard Schultz says he might be considering a run as a third-party candidate. Schultz spoke during a conference at Mandalay Bay's Convention Center on Wednesday.
Well, survey results obtained exclusively by 8 News Now show teachers overwhelmingly support taking some sort of action, including a strike, to ensure they get raises. This comes as the local teachers union and its members are expressing concerns over a number of issues, including pay, in front of lawmakers right now in Carson City.
Yeah, the union has publicly been talking about a possible strike over those promised pay raises, class sizes, and other issues now for about three and a half weeks. A new survey shows just how serious they are about it. After we first reported teachers were considering a strike, the union conducted a survey. 5,000 educators responded, both union and non-union. 94% of them said they are willing to take some sort of demonstrative action, including a strike. We recently spoke with Marie Nisus, who is one of them.
I'm willing to do anything it takes because enough is enough.
CCSD teachers have not received step increases or merit raises in 2 years. The state hasn't funded teacher raises in over a decade. Nisus says that's a big part of why she and other teachers believe they are underpaid.
Without that salary increase, without increasing it to encourage other people from the United States to come here to teach, we're never going to improve.
Clark County teachers last walked out in 1969, prompting lawmakers to change state law that year to prohibit public employees from striking. Clark County Education Association Executive Director John Velardita says teachers are willing to take a risk.
Many years of disappointment, and we entered into this session with high expectation.
Now, Velardita says teachers want to hold lawmakers accountable after many ran on a platform of increasing funding for education.
Even though it's prohibited, it's one of these tipping point moments where people say, you know what, I've got nothing left to lose.
In a response, a CCSD spokesman told us in a statement, quote, Nevada law makes it illegal for local government workers such as school district employees to strike because our work is essential to the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the state of Nevada, including the 320,000 children we serve.
Well, Patrick, we know now how the union feels thanks to that survey, but did the poll ask if the public is behind them on any kind of potential strike?
Yeah, they did a separate poll. They conducted about 400 likely voters for 2020. That poll asked different questions of the public. About 3/4 of them said they would support a strike in different forms. So there were several questions related to a strike. CCSD mentioned that it would be against state law to strike, but they're banking on the fact that the school district already has trouble recruiting teachers, so they're not going to start firing them for striking. I mean, you're talking about 20,000 teachers. How many subs do they have? So realistically, they're looking at a numbers game right now.
It's not like Reagan, the air traffic controllers.
Right, exactly. Well, coming up next, more controversy in the Department of Interior.
Just days after being confirmed, the Secretary of Interior is under investigation for alleged ethics violations. I'm Alexandra Limon in Washington with the story coming up.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
Well, less than a week into taking over as Secretary for the Department of the Interior, David Bernhardt is already under investigation.
Yeah, that's being led by the Office of the Inspector General at the request of Senators Ron Wyden and Mazie Hirono. The Democratic senators say Bernhardt was a lobbyist for fossil fuel industries and his former clients pose a conflict of interest. They also question his role in burying a pesticide report that shows chemicals are killing hundreds of species that are protected under the Endangered Species Act. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Alexandra Limon was on the story this week, and I talked to her about it. The previous secretary had at least 12.5 investigations while he was in office as the Secretary of Interior. The new secretary has only been in for days and he's already under investigation. What do we know so far about what they're looking at?
Well, I spoke to the Inspector General's office of the Department of Interior, and they did confirm they've opened an ethics investigation into the newly confirmed secretary, David Bernhardt. The IG's office told me that they opened this investigation because several lawmakers and environmental groups, but specifically Senators Hirono and Senator Wyden, requested that an ethics investigation be opened. First off, because David Bernhardt, as you know, used to be a former lobbyist for the fossil fuel industry. So these senators say that he has dozens of clients that pose a conflict of interest because the Department of Interior's mission is supposed to be to protect public lands. They believe, these lawmakers, that Bernhardt is prioritizing the interests of the oil industry and allowing, drilling permits in areas that maybe they believe shouldn't be allowed. They also say that there are allegations out there that Bernhardt, during his time as acting and deputy Secretary of Interior, Interior since 2017 that he's been taking secret meetings with executives of the timber, oil, and gas industry. That's a very serious allegation. The allegations are that they weren't marked on his calendar at all, or that they were marked as external meetings with no other information. Now, I spoke to a spokesperson with the Department of Interior. She says that those allegations are not true, and according to what she told me, she claims that Bernhardt's calendar has been in compliance, complete compliance, she said, with federal record-keeping laws.
And we also have a section on LasVegasNow.com featuring the stories done by our Washington, D.C. Bureau. You can just look for the Washington News section.
Well, former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke was no stranger to ethics investigations himself, and now he has a new job with a Nevada gold mining firm. U.S. Gold Corporation hired Zinke as a board member and consultant. That company did business with the Interior Department while Zinke was heading it. He resigned from the federal agency amid ethics allegations.
Grading Governor Sisolak.
I'm going to give him a B.
I give him credit for thinking about some of these things before he just jumped in and tried to enact them.
The face-off panel goes through the highs and lows of Governor Sisolak's first 100 days in the governor's mansion.
Plus, banning underage marriage, the bill making its way through the legislature with the aim of ending child brides. That's next as Politics Now continues. New Governor Steve Sisolak has been in office for more than 100 days now. So how are people grading him so far? We asked our face-off panel. Here's KXNT radio host Alan Stock and Battleborn Progress Deputy Director Maria Teresa Lieberman.
Let's just go with a letter grade first, A to F, and why? How do you think he's done?
I think I'm going to give him a B just because there's more progress, probably an A minus actually. I wouldn't be a very good teacher, obviously.
Too easy, too soft.
I think, obviously, signing some very important measures from the beginning, especially really working towards more gun violence prevention, also a lot of the work around sexual assault at the state level and making sure that there's certain regulations in place to make sure that those things are actually worked on and victims are listened to is very important. And but there's more progress that is going to be happening in the next 100-ish days, and during the next few months in session.
I give him a B minus. I think he's been okay. The gun violence thing, when people say that, I cringe. It's violence out there. People use violent means for a lot of things, but the bump stock thing was a no-brainer because they were going to do that. President Trump said we should get rid of it too. I mean, that's a staple these days. The background check issue, I'm not against background checks. I've said that before. I think that the question one was obviously not viable to be able to implement the way it was, so they've tried to implement it anyway, and it'll be in the courts for the next 2 years. He made some missteps, which he's going to have to face. He did promise teachers a 3% pay raise, and now we're being told by various folks, like in Clark County and elsewhere, they don't have the money for it. They just don't have the money. He also promised not to raise taxes, which I like. You know, I think that's terrific. But you know, if you're going to spend more, you've got to bring more in, and I'm not sure how he's going to do that.
What's keeping you from giving him that perfect grade?
I think it's just the legislative process overall. I think our process is meant to be slow. You know, even though we only have 120 days every 2 years, it's still meant to be something that is fully thought out. And I think that grade will change at the end, 8-, because we still have some more things that need to go through the legislative process. You know, we still need to see minimum wage go through. We still need to see some of the other workers' issues go through. And the teacher pay raise might be a sticking point, but I think hopefully that will go through as well.
I like the fact that he has not gone through with some of the things that they originally had talked about. One of the issues was to want to ban certain guns. I was concerned about them trying to say we've got to get rid of magazines that hold over 9 rounds or 10 rounds or whatever. I give him credit for thinking about some of these things before he just jumped in and tried to enact them.
We can also watch Alan and Maria Teresa debate whether the new Secretary of Interior is good for Nevada and how the legislature is doing on enacting its progressive agenda. That's on LasVegasNow.com. Look for the political news tab under the news section. Patrick?
This is Eye on Carson City, where we tell you about what else is going on up at the state capitol. The Senate passed a bill that would codify state-level protections for patients with pre-existing conditions. It aims to keep the protection just in case the Affordable Care Act is repealed. That bill passed unanimously. A bill that would ban anyone under the age of 18 from getting married in Nevada passed the state assembly. AB 139 went with a 32-8 vote. Right now, younger than 18 can get married with permission of a parent or a judge. The aim is overall to prevent child brides. And the Senate also passed a bill that seeks to rewrite our state's abortion laws. The bill's sponsor, Democrat Ivana Cancela, says the legislation would bring the state's informed consent laws for abortion in line with medical best practices. SB 179 would also do away with some criminal penalties and parental notification laws. It passed 12-9 with 2 Democrats joining in with the Republican opposition. So, Steve, that under 18 marriage ban that we just talked about, there was some interesting testimony about just how often it actually happens.
Yeah, it's amazing. Some 14-year-old girls have been allowed to marry as recently as 2011. A 15-year-old girl was allowed to marry last fall. The youngest ever to get married was 13 years old, had to have permission for that. Those are all below the age of consent in Nevada, interestingly, and we're one of 18 states that does not have a minimum age to get married.
Well, recruiting local doctors will tell you how one Nevada senator is trying to create more access to medical care. That's coming up on Politics Now.
If you
Nevada Senator Jackie Rosen was putting health care in the spotlight this week. She toured the UNLV Medical School on Monday, checking out the new technology that's being used in the classroom. The senator also talked about the importance of recruiting students from right here in our community.
When we take young adults who go to school here, they train here, they've already grown up here. Their parents are here, so their parents want their grandkids here, that's for sure. But what happens is that they invest in their community. They're already invested, they invest more. And then it also creates that people pipeline, those robust jobs that are supportive of our physicians in their offices and in the hospitals.
The senator also held a discussion on the need for medical residencies in the Silver State. She has requested that the Government Accountability Office examine ways to improve access to primary and specialty care. You can watch an extended interview I had with her about both of those on LasVegasNow.com under the Political News tab.
What to watch? Expect another flurry of votes this week. The deadline for bills to pass out of the House where they were originally introduced is midnight on Tuesday. Right now, only about 80 bills concerning budget issues are exempt from those deadlines, so there could be a late night session on Tuesday, although lawmakers wrapped up work on the last deadline day, that's April 12th, by about 6 p.m.
Yeah, they surprised everybody that night, including some of the senators I spoke with.
Many surprises there. Well, that's our show. Thanks very much for watching Politics Now. You can email me, Sebelius, LasVegasNow.com.
My email, pwalker@LasVegasNow.com. Stay up to date online. We'll see you every Saturday.